Today's top story, it depends on where you look. It always does. We make a choice about what we pay attention to. We make a choice about what we decide is important and where our energy goes. And I choose to put it on a bunch of monks doing a loving kindness meditation for all of our benefit in Washington, D.C. To me, that is one of the most surprising and interesting stories today. Are there other stories that are important and will definitely be leading mainstream newscasts? Yes. Are they what we should be looking at? I'm not sure. The monks walking for peace from Texas to Washington, D.C. is really something. 108 days ago, they left with nobody paying attention. I wasn't paying attention until I found out they had a dog with them, if I'm being honest, with the simple goal of getting people to maybe be a little more aware of the values of unity, compassion, and peace. That's it. They weren't getting national and international coverage. They didn't have, at that point, thousands of people lining the streets and tens of thousands meditating along with them. It started small, and we didn't see it coming. To me, the fact that it has turned into something that is so important to so many people and covered by everyone, including Fox News, is really curious, right? It says something about where we are and what people are longing for right now. And it's different, right? It is different than the Epstein files. It is different than the royals, than the endless geopolitics. We can pay attention to all of those things. We can make them important. But are they what we should be looking at in the way we should be looking at them? I'm not so sure. It's not always about what is good or bad because they're being very Buddhist today. There are elements of good and bad. There's duality in pretty much every story that you're going to cover. I can look at uh, a Russian missile attack that has killed a young family in Ukraine, and that is horrible and sad. And there's so much suffering going on there in that war. And then there is another story happening, which is Sergey Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, comes out and says, you know what? Actually, we are going to abide by the New START Treaty, which is the nuclear arms treaty, the last one, which has lapsed. You know what? Even though it doesn't exist, we're not going to start another nuclear arms race. So, two things can be true at once, right? They're doing bad things in Ukraine, and oh, we are hurting that nuclear arms race for now. Pretty good. I look at Cuba, where we have been covering the strangulation of the regime, that are we going to kind of Venezuela, that country, and they're running out of fuel. And everyone is talking about the tourists. So if you're a Canadian, Canadians love going to Cuba for holidays. There's lots of people love going to Cuba for holidays. But now it's all about, oh no, the tourists are trapped, the hotels are closed, right? This is the thing. Or the geopolitics, right? What is the US game plan? How are they making it work? And I'm not saying it's not interesting. There's interesting conversation that there is somebody inside Cuba in the Raul Castro regime who is willing to be the Delcy Rodriguez, right? Who is willing to help the US government with their goals to see a change in things. That's all important, right? Tourists and geopolitics. I'm not saying it's not important. As someone who has been trapped in a place or two, it's not great. However, I think this is more interesting. There is a circular issued that they're going to restrict gasoline to the diplomatic missions. And not only that, they're going to restrict gasoline based essentially on whether or not they like your country or not. So Russia comes out really well. If you are Canada, you get less. And if you're somebody else, you might get even less. It says something about a country and where it's at, not just the commercial aviation stuff, but if you're restricting gas to the diplomats, things are getting tight. And it's a good way to apply pressure because people don't like not being able to get around themselves. So there's a good chance sometimes that that can start to move things, right? Regular Cubans not being able to get around on buses, nobody does anything. Diplomats not being able to drive their cars, suddenly something starts to happen. So, again, what are we going to pay attention to? Sometimes it's the big noisy thing, but we should be looking a little deeper and a little smaller. Iran, right? Those of you who are subscribers, I told you to set your alarms and I set mine for what was going to happen in Iran. And we've been very focused on the Iran nuclear talks and these are going to be a big war. And obviously these great forensic investigations into how many people have died and what has happened with the protests that were so brutally put down by the regime. Today is the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. And they have the bunting and the rallies, and they really want to put on a big show that people like them. They really like them. It is one story. It is one thing to look at. And my former colleague, Lise Doucet, is in Tehran today, and she reports that she heard people saying yay for the government, and she heard shouts of death to the dictator at night. And she met people who were still talking about how tough the economic climate is. And the president was saying that they heard the people and would reply. So there is more than one thing going on. There are women not wearing headscarves. So there is still that element alive, despite so much death. And we pay attention to this anniversary. But if you go on to the Instagram of my beloved Iranian rapper, Lil 21G, I'm still waiting to hear back from you. She is talking about the protests that are planned globally on February 14th, the anti-regime protests. So where are you going to put your attention? Try to look more broadly, try to look differently. And for me, that brings me back to the monks. It's not that they had it easy, right? On this walk, they literally walked barefoot in the snow. Aloka, the peace dog, got so ill that they had to stop, and this veterinary practice took care of Aloka and donated their services. On the human front, there was a car accident so severe that one of the monks lost their leg. And yet, the narrative is not that. The narrative is that something which started so small and humbly, with nobody knowing who these guys were, has ended in Washington, D.C., with thousands and thousands of people saying, may you be happy, may you be well, may you be at peace.